always thought of Alcatraz as just another tourist spot, a relic of the past frozen in time. The island sits there like a ghost in the bay, visible from the piers of San Francisco, surrounded by fog and the whispers of old prisoners. When you grow up nearby, you get used to the stories. Escaped inmates, haunted cells, strange lights in the warden's house, but none of those stories ever involved a phone call. At least, not until I picked up the receiver that should have been dead. It started with an invitation. My cousin Leo worked with the National Park Service and told me about an overnight photography project happening on the island. They were testing some new low-light gear. A couple of staff, a historian, and 3 photographers were allowed to stay past the last ferry. Leo asked if I wanted to come along, just to keep him company. Of course, I said yes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ferry dropped us off just before sunset. The tourists were already gone, leaving the island eerily quiet. The air felt different there, still, thick with something I couldn't name. We set up camp inside the old administrative wing. It was the only section with working generators and minimal lighting. I was assigned a cot in what used to be the staff break room. The windows rattled slightly with the breeze, even though the walls were thick with age. By midnight, the others had wandered off to shoot pictures. I was sitting on an old bench near the central corridor. When I first heard the ringing, it was sharp, cold, not the soft chime of a modern phone, but the harsh mechanical clang of a rotary bell, the kind you hear in old movies. It came from the guard office near cell block B. I looked around. Leo wasn't nearby. I figured maybe someone had set up sound effects for atmosphere, but when I stepped inside the room, the phone on the wall was vibrating. Dust jumped with each ring. I stared at it. The line was cut, literally sliced at the base. I could see the frayed wires. There was no power, no connection, and yet it rang. Something inside me said do not pick it up, but my hand moved anyway. The moment I touched the receiver, the ringing stopped. I stood there, listening to nothing. Then came the voice. "Hello? Is this Officer Barrett?" I didn't speak. I held my breath. The voice was male, raspy, soaked in despair. It continued before I could answer. "I think I did something bad. Real bad. You have to come quick. I can't stop it. It won't let me stop." Then static, a long burst of it, followed by a low hum that vibrated through the metal frame of the desk. I dropped the receiver. It hit the floor with a loud clatter. I backed away, shaking. That phone line had been dead since the 1960s. I checked later. It wasn't hooked up to anything. No batteries, no secret speaker, just an old phone in an abandoned prison. I didn't sleep that night. But that wasn't the worst part. The next day, before we boarded the ferry back, Leo pulled me aside. His face was pale. He held up a small audio recorder we'd used to document the night. "Clara, listen to this." And I did. It was my voice. On the recording, saying the exact same words the man on the phone had said. But I swear to you, I never spoke them. I listened to the recording again and again. Each time, the voice on the tape sounded more like me. Not just in tone, but in rhythm and breath. Like some hidden part of me had surfaced while I was asleep or unaware. Leo insisted I had whispered those words into the mic, maybe as a joke. But I could see in his eyes he didn't really believe that. Neither did I. The ferry ride back felt longer than usual. The bay was calm, but the water looked darker than it should have. I watched the island disappear into the morning mist. That's when I started to feel it. A pressure behind my ears. a faint buzzing, almost like the low hum that came through the phone. I shook my head and blamed it on lack of sleep, but the feeling followed me all the way home. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice, the way it called out to someone named Officer Barrett, the desperation in it, the way it ended in static. I pulled up old archives and prisoner records just to distract myself. I didn't expect to find anything, but I did. Officer Henry Barrett died in 1961. He had been a guard at Alcatraz for over 20 years. His death was ruled an accident, a fall down the service stairs. But buried in an old report was a strange detail. Hours before he died, someone heard him yelling into a phone, screaming about something in the walls, something that wouldn't let him go. The report said the phone line was inactive at the time. That part wasn't meant for public records, but it was there. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. My hands were shaking. I could still hear the phone ringing in my head, over and over. And then the real phone rang, not the one from the island, my actual cell phone. I jumped so hard I knocked over a glass of water. The screen said unknown number. I froze. A full minute passed before I gathered enough nerve to answer. Silence, no breathing, no static, just pure emptiness. Then a click, and then my own voice said, "You should not have answered." I dropped the phone. It slid across the floor and stopped under the couch. I backed away. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my throat. I stood there for what felt like an hour, staring at that phone like it might move on its own. Later that night, I found my bedroom light flickering. It was a new bulb. I had just replaced it the week before. I turned it off and tried to sleep in the dark. I kept the blanket pulled up to my chin like I was 6 years old again. At 3:12 a.m., my landline rang. I don't have a lamp. The sound was real, loud, echoing through the walls. It was coming from the hallway. I got up, slowly, and opened the door. There was a phone on the hallway table, an old rotary model, exactly like the one on Alcatraz. I don't own one. I never have. The ringing continued. I didn't want to answer it, but I did. My voice came through again, but this time it wasn't a warning. This time it asked me a question. "Clara, do you remember what you did?" Then laughter, not mine, not anyone I knew. Just laughter that didn't belong in this world, couldn't move. The phone sat there humming with leftover static, like it was breathing. The voice that came through it, my voice, wasn't just imitating me. It knew me. It knew how I spoke when I was scared. It knew the way I whispered when I was alone. And the question it asked, "Do you remember what you did?" kept echoing in my head like a guilt I didn't recognize. I didn't sleep that night. The phone stayed on the table until dawn. When the sun rose, I checked again. It was gone. Just gone. No signs of it ever being there. I even looked under the table and inside the hall closet like it could have crawled away on its own. I felt ridiculous, but not as ridiculous as I felt when I realized the call log on my cell phone had been erased, completely blank, like it had never rung at all. I spent the day at a cafe just to be around people. I needed normal noise, coffee machines, conversations, the kind of sound that proved I wasn't slipping into something I couldn't get out of. I even considered telling the barista what had happened. But how do you tell someone you think your own voice is calling you from an impossible place? That night, I got a message from Leo. He said he'd been having trouble sleeping too. He kept hearing things at night, not phone calls, just noises, scratching, knocking, like something wanted in. I asked him if he'd listened to the recording again. He said no. He had actually deleted it the day after he showed me. But then he paused and said something that chilled me. He said the file came back. Same name, same sitting right where it had been before. Except this time the audio was different. The same voice, same words. But now there were footsteps behind the voice, pacing. Then a whisper at the very end. 2 days left. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't want to know. I told him to send it to me. But when I checked my inbox hours later, the message was there, but the attachment was corrupted. Only the title showed. Barrett_transmission_1961. That didn't make sense. The file Leo had shown me was from his own recorder. It was dated last week. How did it now have a name tied to a year 6 decades ago? That night, I locked all my doors, pulled my curtains closed, left every light on, and just waited. I didn't even try to sleep. Around midnight, the static returned. Not from a phone this time, from the walls. I pressed my ear against the drywall and heard breathing. Not wind, not plumbing, breathing, human, heavy, slow. It followed me from room to room, no matter where I went in the apartment. It was always right there, behind the wall, just a few inches of plaster and wood away. I opened the closet to get my coat. I wanted to go stay at a hotel, but there it was again. The rotary phone, sitting right in the middle of the floor like it had been waiting for me. It rang once, then stopped, and then the voice returned. This time from behind me. Do you remember yet, Clara? I turned around. No one was there, but the hallway lights dimmed, and somewhere just outside my apartment, I heard the metal clink of prison bars slamming shut. After that night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just walked out and kept walking until the sunrise hit my face like a slap. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and stared out the window until people started showing up for breakfast. I should have gone to Leo's, or maybe a hotel, but part of me didn't want anyone else to get pulled into this, especially him. I decided to go to the public library, somewhere quiet and neutral. I pulled up old blueprints of Alcatraz, the old phone lines, the staff listings, the inmate rosters, everything I could find. And then I noticed something strange. Officer Barrett had been stationed near B, the same area where I had answered the phone that night. But here's what really got to me. Barrett's personnel file included a disciplinary notice from 1961. It said he had used the phone system for unauthorized communication. It didn't say with who, just that he had spoken to someone multiple times, someone who wasn't real. I sat back in the chair. That low hum started again in my ears. It was faint but growing louder. I looked around the library. No one else seemed to hear it. But I did. It pulsed through my skull like a second heartbeat. I closed the file and left. On my way out, I passed a man in the entryway. He was standing still, not browsing, not moving, just watching me. His eyes were pale like faded glass, and he wore an old brown uniform. I looked back once I reached the sidewalk. He was gone. That night, I checked into a small motel just outside of the city. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a lock. I left the TV on low volume to drown out the silence. I tried to convince myself I was safe, but I was wrong. At 3 a.m. sharp, the motel phone rang. I didn't want to pick it up. I really didn't, but I did. This time, there was no static. Only a single word whispered into the line: confess. I hung up and unplugged the phone. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. I checked the mirror in the bathroom, and for a second, I saw someone else's reflection behind mine. A face blurred, just out of focus. I turned, no one there. I grabbed my bag and left again. By morning, I was sitting on Leo's couch. He looked even worse than I did. His eyes were sunken. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He said he kept hearing doors slam at night, and not just any doors. Cell doors, like thick iron on stone. He didn't sleep anymore, not because he didn't want to, because he couldn't. "Clara," he said, "what did we bring back from that island?" I didn't have an answer, but I had a theory. Alcatraz was never just a prison. It was a container, and we might have cracked it open. I couldn't stop thinking about the word. I heard on the phone, confess, it didn't make sense. I hadn't done anything wrong, at least not anything worth this kind of haunting, unless it wasn't about me, unless it was about someone else, something else. Leo and I decided to go back to the island, not officially, not through the tours. We knew a guy who worked in maintenance and owed Leo a favor. He could get us on the boat after hours. No guides, no tourists, just us and the silence. We stepped onto the dock just after sunset. The buildings loomed in the dark like empty bones. The wind had picked up and the whole place smelled like rust and salt. The door to the main block creaked as we pushed it open. The moment we stepped inside, I could hear it again. That hum, low, constant, almost like it had been waiting for us. We walked past the old control room, past the library, back to cell block B. The phone was still on the wall. Same spot, same cracks in the casing, only now it was ringing again. I told Leo not to touch it. We kept walking, room by room, trying to find something. Anything that explained what was happening. That's when Leo pointed out a cell that had no name on it. Every cell in the block had a brass tag with a number and a name, but this one was blank, just a strip of worn metal. The door wasn't locked. Inside, we found something that hadn't been in any archive. Etched into the back wall, with what looked like fingernails, were the words, "Do not answer the phone." There were more scratches, dozens, maybe hundreds, all the same, overlapping, disparate. Leo stepped out first, but I lingered. Something about the air in that cell felt wrong, heavy, and then I noticed the corner of the room, a small rusted hatch in the floor, half open. I knelt beside it. The air coming from below was cold and damp. Then I heard it. Footsteps coming up the hatch. I stumbled back, slammed the cell door shut. Leo grabbed my arm. "Clara," he whispered, "we need to go." But I had already heard it. The whisper from the phone. Only now it was right in my ear. 3 have answered. 1 remains. We ran. We didn't even try to be quiet. Our footsteps echoed through the empty halls. The phone behind us kept ringing. Louder, closer. It didn't stop. Back on the dock, the wind nearly knocked us down. The ferry wasn't there yet. We waited in silence. That's when Leo turned to me and said, "Did you hear the name it said?" I nodded, because I had. But I hadn't told him what it was, and he hadn't told me either. Still, we had both heard it. Barrett, not the officer, not the guard, someone else. That night after we returned from the island, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about that name, Barrett, the voice on the phone, the cell with no name, the hatch, the scratches. It was all connected. I just didn't know how. I pulled out the printout of Barrett's personnel file. There wasn't much, a few disciplinary reports, 1 photo, and a list of transfers. But something caught my eye. A short note at the bottom of the last page. Final communication recorded. No surviving audio, marked for containment. It didn't make sense. Containment? For a phone call? I called Leo. He didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. I drove to his place in the middle of the night. I wasn't ready for what I found. His front door was open, just slightly, like someone had stepped inside and didn't bother to close it all the way. The lights were on. His TV was frozen on static, but Leo wasn't there. His phone sat on the counter. I picked it up. It buzzed in my hand and opened a voice memo on its own. No buttons pressed. Just playback. It was Leo. He was whispering. At first, I couldn't make out the words. Then, I heard it. They're in the walls now. Clara, they know your name. The message ended with the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. I dropped the phone. Something moved in the hallway. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I left. By sunrise, I was back in my apartment, every light on. Windows locked. I checked every room twice. Nothing out of place. Until I looked in the mirror. There was writing. Faint, fogged onto the glass from the inside. Last chance, confess. I wiped it away with my sleeve. It came back. Same words. Same handwriting. Only this time it added something else underneath. Barrett never did. I sat on the floor and cried. I don't even know why. I wasn't sure what they wanted from me. I didn't have anything to confess. Unless this wasn't about guilt. It was about silence. About something that happened in that prison that was never meant to be spoken. I laid down and closed my eyes just to shut everything out. Just for a second. That's when the phone rang again. Not the cell phone. Not the rotary. The one built into the wall in the hallway. The one that was never connected. The one I didn't even know could ring. I approached slowly. The air felt thick. My ears started to ring. My fingertips went cold. I picked it up. Nothing, just breathing. Then a second voice. This one wasn't mine, and it wasn't Leo's. It was a deep whisper. You brought it back. I dropped the phone and stepped back. The hallway darkened, not like a light going out, more like a shadow swallowing everything. And then from inside the wall, I heard someone say, "Open the hatch." I couldn't shake the words. Open the hatch. They echoed in my mind like a command and a warning all at once. That same night, I found myself standing in my apartment hallway, staring at the wall where the phone had rung. The air felt thick and heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then, I noticed it. A faint outline on the floor, almost like a seam, right where the old phone line would have been installed years ago. I knelt down and pressed my fingers to the cold wood. My heart hammered. The hatch. I searched for a way to open it. There was a tiny, rusted latch beneath the surface, hidden in the shadows. With a deep breath, I pulled. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The smell hit me immediately. Damp earth, rust, and something metallic underneath it all. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down slowly. Each step echoed against stone walls that felt like they had witnessed decades of secrets. At the bottom was a small room. It looked like a forgotten maintenance chamber. Old pipes, scattered debris, and the unmistakable aura of silence that screams of long-forgotten horrors. And then I saw it. A dusty tape recorder resting on a metal shelf. It was still running. From the speakers came the same voice, the deep whisper that told me you brought it back. I pressed stop. The tape clicked, then silence, then a new voice. A voice filled with sorrow and pain. Help me. The tape was labeled Barrett. I sat there trembling. The tape played over and over in my mind. A man trapped between worlds, trying to reach out from a past buried in darkness. That was when I realized this was bigger than me, bigger than Leo, bigger than the island. This was a story that needed to be told, and maybe, just maybe, set free. I left the underground room with the tape recorder in my bag. The hatch closed behind me with a final creak. I felt like I was carrying a piece of that dark history with me. A ghost trapped in the wires and walls of that prison. Back in my apartment, I played the tape again, this time listening carefully. Barrett's voice was weak but clear. He spoke of things no official record mentioned: torture, secret punishments, names of prisoners who vanished without a trace, names no one wanted to say out loud. I felt chills running down my spine. The tape was a confession, a cry for help from a man who never got justice. That night I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt colder, the shadows longer. I kept hearing faint whispers, not from the tape, not from the phone, but from the walls themselves. I started writing everything down, every detail, every strange sound, every feeling. I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to lose the connection. Leo called the next morning. His voice was shaky. He told me he had done some digging on Barrett, found out something worse than what I expected. Barrett had been accused of a crime, one he didn't commit, a crime so terrible that the guards wanted him gone. They locked him away in that cell with no name, the one with the hatch. He was never seen again, except through that phone. The voices, the whispers, the scratches on the wall. I was starting to believe the island wasn't done with us. It was reaching out, and it wanted its story told. I decided I had to go back to the island, this time not to explore, but to find proof, to finally uncover what happened to Barrett and why his story was trapped in the shadows. Leo agreed to come with me. We arranged another after-hours visit with the maintenance guy. The boat ride was quiet. The water lapped against the hull as if whispering secrets. Once on the island, we headed straight to cell block B. The air was thick with decay and memories. We found the hatch again and opened it slowly. The narrow staircase seemed even darker this time. At the bottom, we discovered something new. A hidden chamber beyond the maintenance room. A small prison cell built into the rock itself. The walls were covered in scratches and faded blood stains. In the corner sat a rusted metal box. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were old documents, letters, and a small notebook. The notebook was Barrett's, his handwriting shaky but desperate. He wrote about being framed, about the torture he endured, about the injustice that swallowed him whole. There was a final entry dated just days before he disappeared. I hear the voices. They want the truth told. If I vanish, let this be my confession. I felt tears sting my eyes. This was the proof we needed. Leo and I carefully gathered everything and left the chamber. As we climbed back up, I swore I heard whispers following us. A voice soft but urgent. "Thank you." Back in my apartment, I laid out everything we found. The letters, the notebook, the documents. Barrett's story was finally visible in black and white. A story of pain, betrayal, and a desperate cry for justice. I knew what I had to do. I started reaching out to historians, journalists, and even paranormal investigators. I shared what I found, hoping someone could help me set Barrett free. Days passed and the strange occurrences slowed down. The whispers stopped. The phone calls ceased. One evening, as I sat writing the final part of this story, my phone rang one last time. It wasn't the old rotary. It was my cell phone. The caller ID was blank. I answered. A soft voice whispered, "Thank you, Clara." Then silence. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Barrett was gone, free. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The island may still hold its secrets, but tonight, at least, the past was at peace. If you enjoyed this journey through shadows and secrets, please like the video and subscribe. It means the world to me and helps keep these stories alive. And don't forget to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Until next time, keep your lights low and your senses sharp. Clara out.